London, England, 1943. The first time Isaac Xavier saw her was through his viewfinder. The scene framed perfectly, a young nurse with copper hair escaping her cap, kneeling beside a wounded soldier on a stretcher just arrived from Dunkirk. Her hands moved with precision, but it was her eyes that arrested him, intent, compassionate, unafraid of the man's suffering. Isaac adjusted his focus and pressed the shutter. The mechanical click seemed to reach her through the chaos of Victoria Station. She looked up directly into his lens, and Isaac felt the peculiar sensation of being the one captured rather than the captor. He lowered his lacquer and nodded in apology for the intrusion. To his surprise, she offered a small smile before returning to her patient. That smile, tentative yet warm, would haunt Isaac's dreams for weeks to come. The War Office had assigned him to document Britain's medical response to the casualties streaming back from the continent. After years photographing the Spanish Civil War and the early advances of German forces across Europe, this assignment felt almost peaceful, despite the suffering surrounding him. At least in London, he could sleep in a proper bed without the immediate fear of artillery shells or sniper fire. 3 days later, he saw her again at St. Thomas Hospital. Katherine Davis, as he would later learn, was checking supplies in a storage closet when he rounded the corner, his camera bag slung over his shoulder. "Oh. You're the photographer from the station," she said, recognizing him instantly. Isaac nodded. "I hope you didn't mind. The ministry wants images that show the dedication of medical staff. Your compassion was evident." "Did the photos turn out well?" she asked, closing the supply cabinet. "They did. Though I'm afraid they'll be heavily censored before publication. Can't let the public see too much of the reality." Katherine smoothed her uniform. "I suppose that's your burden as a war photographer. Capturing truth that others will filter." "One of many burdens," he replied, surprised by her insight. She studied him with intelligent eyes. "You've seen the front, haven't you? Not just hospitals and train stations. Spain. Poland. France before the evacuation." His voice remained steady, but something in his expression must have betrayed him. "I can tell," she said softly. "Your eyes have that look. The same as the men who come back." The air raid siren's wail interrupted them, its rising and falling pitch cutting through their conversation like a knife. "Duty calls," Katherine said, already moving toward the ward. "For both of us, I imagine." Isaac raised his camera slightly. "Unfortunately, air raids make compelling photographs. Be careful up on that roof," she called over her shoulder. "We've enough patients already." He watched her walk away, efficient steps carrying her toward whatever emergency awaited. It struck him then, the strange symmetry of their work. Both witnesses to suffering, both collectors of moments others would rather forget. Throughout that autumn, Isaac found himself returning to St. Thomas even when assignments took him elsewhere. He told himself it was the convenience of the location, the hospital's grand Victorian architecture against the Thames providing context for his images. But he knew the truth each time Katherine appeared in a corridor or ward, and his heart quickened despite his professional composure. Their conversations were brief at first, snatched moments between her shifts and his assignments. She was from Cornwall originally, had trained as a nurse before the war, and volunteered immediately after Chamberlain's radio announcement. He shared little of his background but spoke more freely about his work than he had with anyone since the war began. "How do you bear it?" she asked one evening as they shared tea in the hospital canteen. "Seeing everything through that lens, but never intervening." Isaac set down his cup. "Who says I don't intervene?" "I assumed, that's the struggle," he interrupted, his voice low. "In Spain, I once set down my camera to help pull children from a bombed school. Afterward, my editor said those missing photographs might have moved governments to act. That perhaps more children died because I chose to save 3 instead of documenting their plight." Katherine reached across the table, her fingers briefly touching his. "I don't believe compassion is ever the wrong choice. Nor do I. But the question haunts me still. Their relationship progressed in these stolen moments: a walk along the embankment during an evening off, a shared cigarette under the hospital awning during a downpour, a chance meeting at a small gallery where Isaac's pre-war photographs of Paris were being exhibited alongside other photojournalists. It was at this gallery, surrounded by images of a world already lost, that Katherine first kissed him. They stood before a photograph he had taken of an old man playing chess in the Jardin du Luxembourg, the towers of Notre Dame visible in the distance. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Not just the place, but how you saw it." "I was younger then," Isaac replied. "Less aware of how fragile it all was." She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "We're all more aware now." The kiss was gentle, tentative and questioning at first, then deepening with a sudden urgency that spoke of the precariousness of their time. When they parted, Isaac kept his eyes closed for a moment longer, memorizing the feeling like an image he could develop later in the darkroom of his mind. Their courtship accelerated in the compressed timeline of wartime romance. What might have taken years in peacetime transpired in months. Every blackout, every raid, every departure for assignment carried the unspoken possibility that it might be their last meeting. Isaac proposed on New Year's Eve, as 1943 gave way to 1944. They stood on Waterloo Bridge during a rare moment when the searchlights were testing patterns rather than hunting German bombers. The Thames below was dark, the buildings along its banks mere silhouettes against the night sky. "I have nothing to offer but uncertainty," he said, his voice almost lost in the winter wind. "My assignments take me where the war demands. I've seen too much to promise you happiness without shadows." Katherine's laugh was soft but genuine. "Have you looked around lately, Isaac? None of us has anything but uncertainty. At least we could face it together." They married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at a church that had already lost its stained glass to bomb blasts. Katherine wore a simple blue dress, her best, though not a wedding gown. Fabric was too precious to waste on single-use garments. Isaac wore his one good suit, already showing wear at the cuffs. Their witnesses were a fellow nurse and one of Isaac's colleagues from the photographic corps. The brief honeymoon that followed, 2 nights in a small hotel in Brighton that had somehow maintained its pre-war standards despite rationing, felt like stepping into another world. For 48 hours, they allowed themselves to forget the war, to be simply a man and woman discovering each other's bodies, preferences, laughter. "I never thought I'd find this during war," Katherine whispered one morning as dawn broke over the English Channel, pale light filtering through thin curtains. "It feels almost like a betrayal to be this happy when there's so much suffering." Isaac traced the line of her shoulder with his fingertips. "Perhaps it's the opposite. Perhaps finding moments of joy despite everything is how we truly resist what's happening." Their married life began in a small flat in Bloomsbury that Isaac had acquired years earlier. The building had suffered minor damage during the Blitz, but remained structurally sound. Katherine brought few possessions, some books, clothing, a quilt her grandmother had made. Isaac's domain was the small darkroom he had constructed in what once was a pantry, where the chemical smells of developer and fixer permeated everything despite his best ventilation efforts. Katherine didn't mind. "It smells like you," she said once, embracing him after a long shift at the hospital. "Those chemicals and your soap and cigarettes, that's my husband." For 3 months, they navigated the rhythms of wartime marriage, irregular hours, sudden assignments, nights interrupted by sirens. They learned each other's habits, quirks, fears. Katherine discovered Isaac's nightmares, sudden jerking movements and muffled cries that spoke of memories he rarely articulated in daylight. Isaac learned that Katherine sang softly to herself when performing routine tasks, old Cornish folk songs her father had taught her. Then came the letter Isaac had been dreading. The Allied invasion of Europe was approaching, though the location remained secret even from those who would document it. War correspondents and photographers were being assembled. His orders were clear: report to a military camp in southern England within 48 hours. That night, they lay in bed facing each other, not speaking for long minutes. Katherine finally broke the silence. "Will you be landing with the first waves?" she asked, her professional composure momentarily fractured. "No. Second day, most likely." After the beachheads are secured. He didn't mention that secured was a relative term, that photographers had died alongside soldiers in every major landing of the war. I should be grateful for that small mercy, I suppose. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingertip. I've been preparing myself for this since we met. Doesn't make it any easier. I'll come back, Isaac said, the promise sounding hollow even to his own ears. How many men had said those exact words to women across Europe these past 5 years? How many had broken that promise through no fault of their own? I know you'll try, Katherine answered, refusing the comfort of false certainty. That's all any of us can do. Their last day together passed too quickly. Isaac packed his equipment with methodical care: cameras, lenses, film canisters, waterproof covers. Katherine prepared a package of what luxuries she could gather: chocolate saved from her rations, cigarettes, a small flask of whiskey, wool socks she had knitted during night shifts. In the evening, they walked through Regent's Park, the spring foliage providing a surreal counterpoint to the barrage balloons floating overhead. Neither spoke much, both acutely aware of each passing minute. Take this, Katherine said suddenly, removing a slender chain from around her neck. A small silver compass hung from it, no larger than a penny. It was my brother's. He carried it through Dunkirk. Katherine, I can't, please. Not for luck, I'm not superstitious. But to remember your way home. She placed it in his palm and closed his fingers around it. Their final morning arrived with unseasonable sunshine streaming through the curtains. Isaac had arranged for a military vehicle to collect him at noon. They moved through their flat like dancers in a choreographed performance of normalcy: coffee brewed, toast prepared despite the poor quality of wartime bread, the wireless playing soft music rather than news. At 11, Isaac took out his Leica. Let me photograph you, he said quietly. Not for publication. Just for me. Katherine nodded, understanding. They went to the small balcony where the light was best. She wore a simple blouse and skirt, her copper hair loose around her shoulders rather than constrained by her nurse's cap. How should I look? She asked, uncharacteristically self-conscious. Just be Katherine, he answered, raising the camera to his eye. She stood against the railing, London's damaged skyline behind her. Isaac adjusted his focus, watching her expression through the viewfinder. He saw the complex emotions crossing her face: love, fear, pride, resignation. Tell me about after the war, he said as he prepared to capture the image. What will we do when this is finished? A smile spread across her face then, not forced, but genuine and full of hope. We'll go to Cornwall first. I want you to see where I grew up, the cliffs and the sea. Then perhaps Paris, if it still stands. You can show me those places in your photographs. We might even have children, if you'd like that. Isaac pressed the shutter at that precise moment, capturing Katherine with that smile of possible futures on her lips, her eyes bright with both tears and determination. The mechanical click seemed to echo in the spring air. As if summoned by the sound, the air raid sirens began their mournful wail, a daylight raid, unexpected after weeks of relative quiet. They looked at each other in momentary confusion. The Germans had largely abandoned daylight bombing of London. The occasional raid still occurred, but usually under cover of darkness. Probably just a precaution, Isaac said, already moving inside to gather his photography equipment out of professional habit. 5 years of war had conditioned him to document even as others sought shelter. We should go downstairs, Katherine replied, her nurse's training similarly asserting itself. The Millers in 2B might need help getting to the shelter. Mrs. Miller's arthritis has been troubling her. The first explosion came before either could reach the door, not close enough to damage their building, but near enough to rattle the windows in their frames. Then another, closer, the sound rolling through the streets like thunder. Isaac moved to the window despite years of training to do otherwise. Several streets away, black smoke billowed upward. His photographer's eye immediately recognized the distinctive pattern of incendiary bombs rather than high explosives. They're targeting the university area, he said, already calculating angle and distance. Random terror bombing. Katherine joined him, her expression shifting to professional assessment. St. Bartholomew's will be receiving casualties. I should report in. The next explosion was much closer, close enough that the pressure wave shattered their windows, sending glass shards flying inward. Isaac instinctively pulled Katherine away from the spray, feeling pieces strike his back as he shielded her. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, holding her at arm's length to assess for injuries. "No, I'm fine," she answered, already checking him in return. "Your back, just my jacket," he assured her, though he wasn't certain. The building trembled with another impact. Plaster dust rained down from the ceiling. The bombs were walking their way, a line of sequential drops moving systematically through the neighborhood. "We need to get to the shelter now," Katherine said, her voice calm despite everything. She grabbed her nurse's bag, always packed for emergencies, and moved toward the door. Isaac hesitated, torn between the instinct to document and the need to ensure Katherine's safety. He quickly slipped his lacquer and extra film into his satchel. They made it to the stairwell just as another explosion rocked the building, much closer now, perhaps the next street over. The lights flickered and died. In the sudden dimness, Isaac reached for Katherine's hand. "Stay close," he said, leading the way down the stairs by memory. They had practiced this in countless drills and actual raids. 3 floors down, they found Mrs. Miller struggling on the landing, her husband trying to support her. "Let me help," Katherine said immediately, moving to the elderly woman's side. Isaac took Mr. Miller's place, supporting Mrs. Miller's weight against his shoulder. "Thank you, dears," the old woman gasped. "These stairs are the devil with my joints." They descended slowly, each impact from outside sending tremors through the building's frame. 2 more floors to the basement shelter. 1 more floor. Almost there. The final explosion came without warning, not outside, but seemingly within the building itself. Later, investigators would determine that an incendiary had come through the roof and ignited gas lines. In the moment, there was only sound, pressure, and darkness. Isaac felt himself thrown against the wall, Katherine and Mrs. Miller torn from his grasp. Concrete dust filled his lungs. Something heavy pressed against his legs. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard screaming from below, the cracking of support beams above. "Katherine," he called, coughing through the dust. "Katherine!" No answer came. As the initial shock faded, Isaac became aware of warm wetness running down his face, blood from a head wound. He pushed away debris covering his legs, grateful to find them bruised but functional. The stairwell was transformed, partially collapsed, illuminated only by flames starting to spread from upper floors. Through swirling dust and smoke, Isaac spotted movement several steps below. Katherine was there, pinned beneath a fallen section of concrete. Mrs. Miller lay nearby, unnaturally still. Mr. Miller was nowhere to be seen. "Katherine," Isaac gasped, scrambling down broken steps to reach her. "Don't move. I'll get you out." Her eyes found his, remarkably clear despite everything. "Isaac! You're bleeding." "It's nothing," he said, already assessing the rubble trapping her. A large concrete beam lay across her lower body, too heavy for him to lift alone. "I need to find help." She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "The building's coming down. I can hear it." Isaac looked up. Through gaps in the damaged ceiling, he could see flames spreading rapidly above them. The remaining support structures groaned under compromised weight. "I'm not leaving you," he said fiercely, trying to wedge his shoulder under the concrete beam. The effort sent spikes of pain through his injured back. "Isaac, stop," Katherine said, her voice taking on the calm authority she used with panicking patients. "Listen to me. You need to go. Now. I can move this. I just need leverage, it's crushing me," she interrupted, her professional assessment leaving no room for false hope. "I can't feel my legs. Internal bleeding, most likely." Isaac felt the world narrow to this single moment, this impossible choice. Above them, something large collapsed, sending vibrations through what remained of the stairwell. They had minutes, perhaps less. Catherine's face softened. You have your assignment. They're waiting for you. To hell with the assignment, Isaac growled, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. To hell with all of it. The invasion needs to be documented, she insisted. The world needs to see. That's your duty, just as this was mine. She glanced at Mrs. Miller, confirming what Isaac already suspected. The elderly woman was beyond help. Another section of ceiling gave way nearby, bringing flames closer. The heat was becoming unbearable. I can't choose the war over you, Isaac said, still trying to shift the concrete despite knowing the futility. Katherine reached up to touch his face, leaving smudges of blood among the dust. We already made our choices long ago, my love. Now go, please. Let me keep one of us safe. In that moment, with flames reflecting in her eyes, Isaac saw the same compassionate determination he had first photographed at Victoria Station. The same essential Katherine who had drawn him back to St. Thomas Hospital day after day. The woman who had kissed him in a gallery surrounded by images of a vanished peace. He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, tasting dust and blood and tears. I love you, he whispered against her mouth. I have from the first moment. I know, she answered, her smile briefly returning despite everything. Now go and come back to tell our story. It was the hardest step he ever took, the first one away from her. Then another. Then another, until he was stumbling down what remained of the stairs toward voices calling from below. Rescue workers in steel helmets appeared through the smoke, pulling him toward the exit as he tried to direct them back to Katherine. My wife, he kept saying. She's trapped. You have to help her. But even as they dragged him into the open air, a great roaring sound came from behind. The remaining structure collapsed inward, burying everything in a cloud of dust and debris. Isaac fought the hands restraining him, trying to return to the ruins despite knowing the futility. It took 3 men to hold him back as he screamed Catherine's name into the settling dust. Hours later, after the medics had treated his wounds and sedated him into numbness, Isaac sat on the edge of an ambulance staring at the mountain of rubble that had been his home. Recovery teams worked methodically, but no one spoke of finding survivors. With trembling hands, he removed his satchel, miraculously still slung across his body. Inside, his Leica remained intact, protected by its case. The film inside contained that final image, Katherine smiling on their balcony, speaking of Cornwall and Paris and children. Of after. 2 days later, Isaac Xavier reported for duty at the Southern England camp as ordered. His physical wounds were bandaged, his expression unreadable behind eyes that had witnessed yet another kind of destruction. Fellow photographers noticed his silence but attributed it to the recent bombing raid, unaware of his specific loss. In his pocket, Catherine's compass hung on its silver chain. Not for luck, she wasn't superstitious. But to remember his way home, even when home no longer existed. On June 7, 1944, Isaac Xavier landed on the coast of Normandy with the second wave of Allied forces. His photographs from that day would become some of the most enduring images of the liberation of Europe, clear-eyed documentation of both horror and hope, of destruction and determination. After Germany's surrender, when other war correspondents returned to England or America, Isaac continued eastward. He documented the liberation of concentration camps with unflinching precision, bearing witness to humanity's darkest capacities and its profound resilience. Only in his private journal did he ever mention Katherine. On the anniversary of her death, he wrote, "I understand now what you meant about duty. About choices made long before we recognized them as choices. I continue to capture truth as you would have wanted. But I still look for your smile in every frame." In 1947, a small gallery in London hosted an exhibition of Isaac Xavier's wartime photographs. Among the now famous images of D-Day and liberation, a single photograph stood apart, a copper-haired woman on a London balcony, smiling at the promise of after, captured moments before the bombs fell.